Okay, in this video we're going to focus on graphing quadratic functions. So we're going to find all the major features of the graph, like the vertex, the axis of symmetry, and the x-intercepts, and we're going to use those to graph the function by hand. So if you recall, when we're in general form, if we think back to the first page of this section, and I talked about there are certain pieces of information you get for free depending on what form you're in. When you're in general form, your value of c without doing any work tells you right away that your y-intercept is whatever that value is. So if I look, even though we don't have it written in here, we have a plus 0 there. So I know that my y-intercept is going to be the point 0, 0. So right away, I know that this point right here is going to be for sure on my graph. That's my y-intercept. Now, I also need to find my vertex, and I can find my vertex by using my vertex formula. I have h is equal to minus b over 2a. In this case, my b is negative 2. So I have a negative negative 2, which gives me a positive 2. And my a is 1. So I have 2 times 1 on the bottom, and that gives me a 1. So I know that for my hk, my h is going to be 1. Now I got to take this and plug it back in to find my corresponding value of y. When I take 1 and I plug it back into x squared minus 2x, let's see, that gives me 1 squared is 1 minus 2 times 1. That's going to give me a negative 1. So I know that this is my hk, my vertex. So when I graph that point here, this is what I get. Okay, now my axis of symmetry, since I know my axis of symmetry comes up through my vertex, it's a vertical line that comes through my vertex. That's this right here. My axis of symmetry is going to be x is equal to 1. That's my vertical line. And I know that that's going to act as my mirror. It's going to be the same thing on either side of that line. So I know for sure then that I have to have this point here to finish off and make my mirror image. So I also know by looking at that my x-intercepts are going to be 0, 0 and 2, 0. Another thing to point out when I graph this, I know that it should be concave up a smile shape because my A is 1, which is positive. So if I'm graphing this, I can also verify that my graph looks correct because I should know which way it's facing. Okay, next example here, I have negative x squared plus 4x minus 4. Let's see. So I know that this is my y-intercept because that's my value of c. So I know for sure it goes through that point right there, negative 4 on the y-axis. Now let's find my vertex. In this case, my b is 4, so I have minus 4 over, and my a is negative 1, so I have 2 times negative 1. So I have negative 4 over negative 2, which gives me a positive 2. So I know the x-coordinate of my vertex should be 2. Now to find my corresponding value of y for that, I have to take my 2 and plug it back in here. So I have 2 squared, which is 4, and that gives me a negative 4 in front. And then that gives me, let's see, a negative 4, and then 4 times 2 is 8, so that's a plus 8, and then I subtract 4, that's going to give me a 0. So my vertex is going to be at 2, 0. Now, I know that my axis of symmetry goes through my vertex. It's a vertical line that goes through my vertex. So my axis of symmetry is going to be x is equal to 2 here. And that will help me find another point on the graph so I can finish graphing this. From here to here is a distance of 2, so I know here to here is a distance of 2. So I should have the point on there for -4. And I can finish drawing my graph. So in this case, my y-intercept is 0, -4. In this case, I only have one x-intercept, which is the point 2, 0, which also happens to be my vertex in this case. Okay, last example. I can already see that we need to rescale this a little bit, that it's going to go off the grid. So let's rescale this. Let's go by 2s. Let's make that 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. And let's make this go by halves. So this would be a half. This would be 1. This would be 1.5. This would be 2. This would be 3. That way it's scaled in a way that it's easier to graph. Okay, so let's find my y-intercept first. That's really easy to find because that's always my value of c. So my y-intercept is x7, which is right here. Okay, so now let's find my vertex. So that's my minus b over 2a. My b in this case is 2. And my a in this case is 2. So that's going to give me a -1/2. So I got to find my corresponding value of y when x is -1/2 so I can find my vertex. So I'm going to take that -1/2 and plug it in here. So that gives me 2 times -1/2 squared plus 2 times -1/2 plus 7. That's going to give me 6.5. So my vertex is at -1/2 and 6.5. So that is about right here. That's my vertex. And I know that my axis of symmetry should come up through that line. So my axis of symmetry is going to be x is equal to -1/2. Now to find an additional point on that line, I'm going to come out 1/2 in the other direction, and that's going to be, remember, this was the point 0.7, so I'm going to come out 1/2 in the other direction, so that's going to be the point 1.7. Whoops, I put that down too low. So, like right here. So it's going to come up like this. I know it's going to be facing up because that's a positive a. So in this case, we have no x-intercepts. Let's see. I think we got everything else. We got the y-intercept is 0, 7. We got our vertex. We know that there is no x-intercepts. And we got our axis of symmetry, which is x is equal to -1/2.